Without consciously thinking about it, the average prisoner felt himself utterly degraded. This became obvious when one observed the contrasts offered by the singular sociological structure of the camp. The more prominent prisoners, the capos, the cooks, the storekeepers, and the camp policemen did not, as a rule, feel degraded at all, like the majority of prisoners, but on the contrary, they felt promoted. Some even developed miniature delusions of grandeur. Clearly, we can all take a lesson out of that one. And that is, you get put into a promotion position or you've got authority over people. Don't let that go to your head.
Yeah, I guess that's a natural thing where they did the experiment test in that university, whatever. And they're all just random students. Yep. One played the prisoner, one group played the guards, and that happened. Yep. It's just an experiment. It's not real life, and it still happened.
Yeah, and it happened in real life, which I think is even more insane. It's even more insane.
Yeah, in a way, huh?
But then, again, how can we sit here and judge when if you're in that situation and you need to survive and you need to do the best to get you to survive and your family survive, and you have an opportunity, are we going to say, nope, I'm going to, instead of doing this where I maybe can do something good in the long run, nope, I'm not going to go across my values. I'm going to die in 3 days, and that's it.
Yeah.
That's a hard decision to make.
Yeah. I mean, it seems easy when you're sitting in the comfort of your home. Be like, I wouldn't do that. Or, you can say, and this is what I would have done or I wouldn't have done. But, yeah, you can't.
Yeah, and, I talk to people about, again, I'm not going to compare anything to what we're talking about here, but in the military, for instance, a lot of times I had to make decisions to I got to do something that maybe I didn't fully agree with, but I knew in the long run it was going to get me something that was going to be beneficial to my team or to my platoon or whatever. Yeah. So you make those little adjustments and you got to suck it up and you do something that you might not want to do, but in the long run it's going to be beneficial.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, I don't even know if this is even a remotely close comparison. But what I am saying is this. You take a human being and you say, look, you can either step up and act a different way and be abusive to these people, or you're going to be dead in 3 days. That's it. Those are your choices.
Yeah. And
it's not that hard to figure out that a lot of people are going to step up and say, cool, I'll abuse those people because I need to live.
Yeah.
My choice is either death.
Yeah.
And by the way, maybe the best person in that group is going to say, you know what, I'm going to do this and I'm going to step up. And when I abuse these people, I'm going to do a little bit less than someone else might.
Right.
And therefore I'm doing the best I can.
Yeah.
I mean, these are decisions. How do you even think about these decisions?
Yeah, I know, man.
And you have to think about them. You have to understand them. You have to understand what human nature is, that there is a survival point for humans. You have an instinct to survive that very few people can overcome.
Yeah.
And I don't even, again, how do you judge whether it's right to overcome it or not? Yeah. When is it right? I mean, obviously, when is it right? We're sitting here. It's easy to say, hey, don't, these guys, why would you kill yourself? Well, if you don't do these things, you're basically killing yourself. Yeah. If you don't step up, if you don't say, okay, I'll work as a capo, if you don't do that, you're killing yourself.
Right.
Does that make it okay? Man.
Yeah.
It's brutal.
It's like you got to figure out whether or not you're better off dead even in the grand scheme of things. Like these people that they're going to kind of succumb to these positions or do all these low things to survive so they can survive and, live on and all this stuff. So it's either that or am I better off dead overall? Like that's the decision you got to make. Dang. Who knows what you'd think, especially with all these conditions.
Yeah, the opposite of that is Dick Winters was talking about how he had, and I don't know if I talked about it on the podcast, but in the book Conversations with Dick Winters, he goes through a big section where he talks about some of the guys in his company, and he called them the killers, and he actually went on and said, hey, I don't want to call them killers because that's going to give the wrong impression, but these guys were my most aggressive guys. They were my best guys. And he said they didn't make it past he said most of them didn't make it. I forget which battle, but he said most of them didn't make it past this certain time because they were so aggressive. They were such good guys. They were so brave that they didn't make it. And this is sort of the opposite, where you have the people that are brave. I guess no, it's the same in that people that are brave and going to hold to their values, they're going to die.
Right.
And if you think about somebody that's cowardly in combat, that says, "Oh, you know what? Echo, you go first. I'm going to sit over here behind this, covered position.
Yeah,
I'm going to live longer." And it's a micro example of what we're talking about here.
Yeah. And this given the book and what we're talking about, this might come off as borderline insulting, if not full-fledged insulting. But you ever watch this show Survivor?
I watched the first one when it was kind of a thing.
Yeah.
And there was a interesting psychology happening. Yeah.
And that psychology.
And plus Rudy Bosch was on it, this retired SEAL Master Chief who everyone kind of knew in the SEAL teams.
Okay, yeah. So, and especially
but what
now,
you're going to say is that the people that are not good human beings are the ones that win.
They get far, put it that way, because they have this weird mechanism at the end where the last, few people who get voted off, they become this sort of a jury. Oh. So it's like if you went through the whole game screwing people over, the jury's going to get you kind of thing. So it's and this is just how the show just sorted itself out over time.
But the first ones didn't have any jury, right?
I don't know. I don't really watch it that much.
I'm going to go ahead and say I'm almost positive they didn't, because Rudy had his hand on some log and they had to keep it there for the longest time. And one person, he actually thought of something else and took his hand off, and then he was out. That was it. Done.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, there's an absolute comparison there. There's an absolute comparison to, if you're willing to be a snake,
right?
You can win the game. And I've talked about that too in promotion. People getting promoted. Yeah. And if you're willing to be a snake, you can get promoted. Yeah. But the thing that I will say in a work environment is that snake might get one promotion. Yeah. They might get 2 promotions. Yeah. They're not going to go the distance. And if you hold the line on doing what's correct, then you might miss that first promotion. You might even miss that second promotion. But eventually, if you're on the right path, you will get the recognition and you will win in the long run. You got to be patient, though. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, in your job, it's not life or death. Death isn't so close that, one slip up, you're dead. You're dead. So that's, obviously the dynamics are different in work in that way. But otherwise, I think so. And Survivor, there's also that other thing that kind of what they talk about or what you were just talking about is it's kind of, in a matter of speaking, playing it safe, where you're just hiding under the wings. You might attach yourself to someone, or you'll avoid any kind of, risky situation, and so in Survivor, you can make it far like that as well.
Yep,
I mean, nowadays, everyone knows about those things, like, oh, you backstabbed everyone, or you just hid behind this guy because he's strong. But at the same time, just like how you're saying, if you're brave or you're going to stick to your morals and be honest with everyone, you'll get voted off real quick. Even if you're really good at, the challenges or something.
But really good leaders get voted? Like if someone just is a dynamic leader, they get voted off almost immediately, right? They're like, oh yeah, see you later.
Too much of a threat to
everybody else.
Right. Same thing.
And actually what you're talking about, going through SEAL training, I would hear it. I didn't hear it when I went through, but I heard it later, this idea of the gray man, and I think we might have actually answered a question on the podcast about that, was going through training and just being a gray man, meaning just don't stand out, not on one way or the other, and you'll be good to go. Yeah. And that's a strategy.
Why in the SEAL teams is that a strategy?
No, it's a strategy going through BUDS, through SEAL training, the initial SEAL training course, because the minute you stand out, people start knowing who you are, and now you got instructors looking at you, and the more they watch you, the more they can see that maybe you're making some mistakes, or maybe you're not doing everything right, or maybe you're not. And so it's better just to be that guy in the middle. I was the guy in the middle, not because I wanted to be, but because I was not, the fastest runner. I wasn't the best swimmer. What you don't want to be is the guy on the tail end, right?
Yeah.
And it's weird because I put so many guys, not through the basic SEAL training, but through the advanced SEAL training. And the guys that I remember, there's two types of guys that I remember. The guys that were awesome and the guys that were horrible. And the guys in the middle, all the gray guys, I know them when I see them,
Right.
but a lot of times I don't 100%. Like I might not know their name, whereas some of the pipe hitters, the young pipe hitters, some E5 pipe hitter that was just getting after it, I'd always remember those guys' names because they would take control of everything and
Yeah.
they'd stand out. And then the other guys you remember are the guys that are totally jacked up. So that idea of being a gray man, it seems like a good policy to have in the concentration camp. Look, I just don't want to stand out. I don't want to have a limp. I don't want to, come across as I just want to fit in and be the gray man. Unless you're going to go the distance, right? Which is, and that's a horrible way of saying, I'm going to stand out by saying, hey, I can whip these prisoners into shape, right? That's going and raising your hand and saying, I'll be a capo.
Right.
I'm going to step up. And what you're risking there is we don't know where this war is going to end and where you're going to be at the end of this thing.
Yeah.
And, I read some stories about that. The war did end. And they did liberate these camps. And it didn't work out good for the capos.
Yeah.
So there's the same thing. You might have done all right getting your promotion the first couple times, but eventually it comes around.
Yeah. Exactly right. Yeah.
Harley Flanagan was talking about karma, and I don't know how much reality there is to that, but there's the reality of you reap what you sow.
Yeah.
And if you treat people, if you take advantage of your position, if you maneuver and screw people over to get ahead of them, they'll remember that.
Yeah.
They'll remember that.
Yeah, and that makes sense. I mean, karma, whether you...
And it's never worth it, by the way. It's
I don't think so
almost
either, yeah.
never worth it.
Yeah.
I mean, could you possibly come up with some scenario where I did this to get a promotion so that I could take care of you and everyone else? You could come up with a solution, but it's very, very rare. And my gut feeling was always like, it's not worth it. It's not worth it to do those little maneuvers and try and better your position on other people's backs.
Yeah, or screwing someone over. And because you got to live with that too. I mean, unless you're like a sociopath or something like that, you have to live with that. And man, yeah. And even at the time, it seems like, I could live with that because, look at my promotion.
You're actually taking a higher road than me. Because you're saying you personally have to live with it, and that's definitely, I'm saying beyond that, even if you're a person that can live with it, you're still going to pay in the long run. Even if you can look yourself in the mirror and be like, I don't care, I got promoted, it's good. That's okay, so you can live with that, that's cool, but guess what? There's something else that's going to come back around, and that is one of those other people that you stepped on their back is going to invent something new at work, and he's going to take over the division, and you're going to pay.
Not to mention the 10 people who watched it happen.
Yeah.
And,
You're just making enemies.
Yeah.
Enemies.
And that's really what karma is for. I mean, karma could be this mystical thing that personally watches you and has this judgment system.
But
and
it could just be real.
Just real life. Just like if I walk up to, even, me and you are even. We don't know each other. I don't have any bad or good feelings towards you. And I come and I slap you. I created a deficit now. Now your intention.
Deficit, by the way. Big deficit.
Yeah. So your intention, whether you do it or not, you're compelled to slap me back, if not more. Usually more.
Yeah.
Because
a lot more.
So that's kind of really what it is. I mean, really, in a small, teeny tiny nutshell.
Yeah.
I go out and start acting mad to everyone. They're not going to be like, oh, I love you. I mean, they might, because they might be, intellectual or they might be able to think about it, but their natural compulsion will be to be mad at you back.
And this, the podcast, Human Nature, talking about human nature. And I always say that war reveals human nature more clearly than anything else because it's so much pressure on the people. Obviously, a concentration camp, it's revealing human nature. And that's exactly what we're talking about. And it reveals itself in crystal clarity on a massive scale in terms of being able to see it in a concentration camp, and you see it reveal itself on a TV show called Survivor, and you see it reveal itself in the work environment. And what I'm saying is, from all that, what you want to do is you want to make sure that when you get put into a position of authority, you don't abuse it. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
You don't want to abuse it. You want to treat people with respect no matter what. And you don't want to step on people's backs to get ahead because ultimately it's not going to pay off. Yeah. It really isn't.
Yeah.
You're only going to fool. Like that leader that you fooled into thinking that you were a great guy, that's only going to last for so long.
Yeah.
And eventually you're going to get found out.
Yeah, man.
Now, all right, let's get back into the book here. The experiences of camp life show that man does have a choice of action. And this is, we've talked about the capos, and he's going to talk about some of the more heroic people and some of those actions very briefly. And he says, because it's the reason there's very briefly is because there wasn't a lot of them.
Yeah.
The experiences of camp life show that man does have a choice of action. There were enough examples, often of a heroic nature, which proved that apathy could be overcome, irritability suppressed. Man can preserve a vestige of spiritual freedom, of independence of mind, even in such terrible conditions of psychic and physical stress. We who lived in concentration camps can remember the men who walked through huts, comforting others, giving away their last piece of bread. They may have been few in number, but they offer sufficient proof that everything can be taken from a man but one thing: the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way. And there it is. I mean, that is it. That is it. This idea, and Captain Plum talked about it as well, and Captain Plum had a quote from Stockdale. And we got to explore this, and I've got a bunch of Stockdale books, and we will get to some Stockdale books. Who was the senior guy in the Hanoi Hilton, and he's a fighter pilot, philosopher guy, brilliant guy, and a hero. Was awarded the Medal of Honor. And one of the things that Captain Plum was talking to us about is Captain Plum said that they got word from Stockdale, and I'm going to misquote it, but I'm going to do my best. It was, just because we're in a prison camp doesn't mean we have to be on defense. We're going to be on offense. In a prison camp. That's just a completely different attitude. It's choosing the attitude. We're not going to sit here and be abused and be put down. We're going to step up. We're going to go on offense. And they did. They did hunger strikes. They passed word around. They wouldn't stand up when people entered there. They did these things. They went on offense. And that's what he's talking about right here, this last human freedom, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances. We always have that choice. No matter what the circumstances are that surround you, you always have that choice. Back to the book. And there are always choices to make. Every day, every hour offered the opportunity to make a decision which determined whether you would or would not submit to those powers which threaten to rob you of your very self, your inner freedom, which determined whether or not you would become the plaything of circumstance, renouncing freedom and dignity to become molded into the form of the typical inmate. Again, there it is. You're in a concentration camp, doomed, and yet you can hang on to that last bastion of freedom in your soul. To not let them win and not let them own that. Back to the book. Seen from this point of view, the mental reactions of the inmates of a concentration camp must seem more to us than the mere expression of certain physical and sociological conditions. Even though conditions such as lack of sleep, insufficient food, and various mental stresses may suggest that the inmates were bound to react in certain ways, in the final analysis, it becomes clear that the sort of person the prisoner became was the result of inner decision and not the result of camp influences alone. Think about that. The sort of person the prisoner became was the result of an inner decision, not the result of the circumstances you're in. That doesn't matter what kind of person you become. What matters is the decisions that you make. Unbelievable. Back to the book. Fundamentally, therefore, any man can, even under such circumstances, decide what shall become of him mentally and spiritually. Okay, physically, you can have that one. You can't control that all the time. But mentally and spiritually, I get to decide what I'm going to be. He may retain his human dignity even in a concentration camp.